A formal interview is basically any interview that you plan ahead of time. Run-and-gun interviews are fine for catching quick sound bites in the hallway, but a formal interview is a better setting for getting a longer, more in-depth interview. Let's go ahead and break down a formal interview, and we're going to build on the concepts that we learned from the run-and-gun interview. Our broadcast journalists are doing a story about the school's upcoming book drive. They've chosen to interview the book drive organizer in the library. You guessed it, because libraries have lots of books. The reporter and the photographer show up early. They set up a tripod, a light, and 2 chairs. After checking the mic,
Check.
they put the lavalier microphone on the chair and they wait for the subject to show up. When the subject shows up, the reporter asks her to run the microphone up a piece of clothing. Then the reporter takes the microphone, runs the cable through the clip, and pins it within about a foot of the subject's mouth. Right off the bat, it's the reporter's job to make a connection with the subject and try to distract her from all the production equipment.
So, how are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Did you have any trouble getting out of class or anything?
Not really. My teacher knows this is a big deal for me, so she was pretty lenient about it.
So, talk about what kind of day you're having or the weather. Whatever you do, don't talk about what you're going to talk about in the interview. You don't want them to say something great before your photographer is rolling. During this time, the photographer is listening in the headphones to make sure the audio levels aren't too soft and they're not too loud, just like in the run-and-gun interview. Next, the photographer is going to frame up the shot using the same composition techniques that we learned from the last chapter. Eyes on third. There's plenty of talking space or nose room in front of her. She's looking at the reporter, not directly into the lens. There's nothing too distracting in the background, just books, and it makes sense because this story is about a book drive. And the camera is eye level, not too high, not too low. When the composition looks good, our photographer gives the reporter a signal, letting him know he's ready to roll. In this case, he clears his throat. At this point, the reporter knows to transition the conversation into the actual interview. And the first question, as with every interview, is...
We're gonna knock out the hardest question first. Can I get you to say your name and spell it for me?
That's right. Can you please say your name and spell it? Then the reporter can start with the questions.
Tell me a little bit about the book drive.
Yeah, so it starts next week, and basically what's happening is budget cuts have affected our school's library, and we need new books. So we've asked the community to start donating, and that's going to be happening for the next 2 weeks.
The reporter keeps a connection with the subject and lets his outline guide the conversation.
What kinds of books would you guys say you're looking for specifically?
Well, right now, mystery and fantasy and adventure are really in.
After the interview is over, our photographer gets a couple of cutaway shots. And if you remember from Volume 1, a cutaway shot is something you can cut away to in your edit suite in order to hide an edit. Here's a few cutaway shots. Our photographer could get a shot of the reporter nodding his head, or maybe of the subject's hands. And here's how you might use that in editing. Say you have these 2 sound bites.
Books just take you to a different place. They're magical.
And you want to put these back to back, but notice what happens in between the 2 cuts.
Books just take you to a different place. They're magical.
We have this nasty little jump cut created here.
Books just take you to a different place. They're magical.
But what you can do is put in one of your cutaway shots, and that hides the jump cut.
Books just take you to a different place. They're magical.
All right, so let's review the concepts from this chapter. First of all, a formal interview is one that is planned ahead of time and that you usually have time to set up for. The microphone is threaded up through the clothing and attached to a lapel within about a foot of the subject's mouth. Just like a run-and-gun interview, it's the photographer's job to cover the basics. Audio levels are good. Eyes are on third. Subject has plenty of talking space. Camera is at eye level, and the subject is looking at the reporter, not into the lens. Then after the interview, the photographer grabs a few cutaway shots that you can use in the edit just in case you need them.